wouldn't stop doing this. And I think it's valuable for any concerned citizen who's interested in these issues to see how the Attorney General answers or does not answer these questions. But what also is the recourse? Because a lot of the members of the panel said you will answer at a later date in a different venue. You will answer. You're not answering now, but you will be answering. How so?
Well, the recourse, Mika, good morning, is for Democrats to win some elections and gain some power back, at least in one branch of Congress, so that they can force some answers or at least force some document production with subpoena power, which they don't have right now. They're essentially powerless, and you saw that on display. I think you guys nailed it in this discussion. This was a depressing, a sad moment for the United States. It was the death knell of congressional oversight for this administration. It was this administration, as you said, thumbing its nose at Congress after thumbing its nose at the judiciary. And, you know, Jonathan talked about the fact that on the rule of law questions, the Republicans are nowhere to be found. That's surprising because we know that not all of these Republicans are on board with everything that this Justice Department is doing privately. But I think the answer to why that is, it speaks to what happened in another part of the hearing. It's about the right-wing propaganda machine that grinds on and accuses the FBI and the Justice Department of having been weaponized and politicized in the last administration. And you had this bizarre episode where Josh Hawley and other senators, but Josh Hawley in particular, claimed that his phones had been tapped by the FBI, which was a lie. And he's a lawyer, he knows better, based on a document that Charles Grassley released that showed that Jack Smith in his investigation obtained the tolling records of some U.S. senators, Republican U.S. senators, as he was trying to investigate who Donald Trump was calling during the January 6th attacks in an effort to delay the certification. So it was part of his investigation. He made clear in his report why he did it, and he explained that he went to the public integrity section and followed the Justice Department manual. But before regular reporters who cover the beat could even sort all of that out, there were stories all over the right-wing media that said essentially Biden FBI spied on senators. And millions of people believe it, unquestionably, and all the constituents of these senators believe it. And so that's what's propelling, I think, this utter lack of Republican skeptical questions of Pam Bondi as she thumbs her nose at senators and reads from Oppo research and doesn't answer a single question. And just because we broke the Homan story here at MSNBC, I'll just say that of all the questions that she didn't answer, that for me was the most frustrating because, you know, she can credibly say, I'm not going to discuss my conversations with the president or I'm not going to discuss a pending criminal investigation. This is closed. There's nothing, there's no reason she can't talk about the Homan matter. There's no reason she can't say whether he took the $50,000, what happened to it, did he keep it, did he pay taxes on it, why was the investigation closed? She could answer those questions, but she is choosing not to, and I think the reasons are obvious to all of us, guys.
And in fact, when she was asked by Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii in detail about that $50,000 bag allegedly given to Tom Homan, she said, "Are you a member of Antifa?" was her comeback. She cited some rally where Senator Hirono had been. So she's not only not answering the question, but just turning to whatever her prepared attack was. Ali Vitale, you were up there on Capitol Hill yesterday. She was asked by, the Attorney General was asked by Senator Klobuchar about the weaponization of her department, about Pam Bondi perhaps helping President Trump go after some of his perceived enemies. To that end, today, we're going to see James Comey arraigned in a federal courthouse in Virginia. What was some of the reaction coming out of that hearing yesterday as you talked to senators?
Look, senators were flummoxed on the Democratic side because of all of the reasons that you guys laid out about how different this was in tone and tenor from the way that we are used to seeing cabinet officials and top administration officials go to Capitol Hill for Congress to do its job of oversight. This isn't some fun thing that they do as an extracurricular activity. Like, this is a central function for these senators and for lawmakers broadly on Capitol Hill. And so even as I was listening yesterday, the hard news was hard to find, frankly. There was only one point where I thought, okay, that's something new I hadn't learned before, and it was the fact that Kash Patel was going to Chicago. The more lasting news, I think, is what all of you have touched on this morning, which is that it's not new to see fiery hearings on the Hill, but it is very much new to see a permission structure, and one that even encourages cabinet members to go to the Hill and try to embarrass lawmakers from the opposing party, because that was what happened at multiple points there. And it's why I asked Senator Cory Booker after he finished questioning the Attorney General what he thought of the way that she was lashing out in prepared ways at his Democratic colleagues. Watch. I do want to ask you about the way that you were conducting your questions to the Attorney General. I thought with you, she actually answered the substance of your questions, but with many of your colleagues, it seemed like she came ready with lines of attack of her own. What do you make of this trend, the tone and tenor that we've seen from Trump administration officials coming up here to testify as you guys are doing your job of oversight?
Yeah, I've never seen kind of personal attacks. Kash Patel just not even coming out of the blocks, sort of attacking senators in a very personal manner. That's not the way it should be done. We have a responsibility, actually, as spelled out in the Constitution, to provide oversight and checks and balances. It's really unfortunate because everybody in that room wants to see violent crime go down, and we have real questions about using the Department of Justice as an arm of the president, as his personal attorneys, to prosecute his personal political vendettas, to pull people away from the kind of crimes that we want solved, and instead focus on people like Comey and other political targets of his. And he's not hiding it. He's being very open. He's literally tweeting at the Attorney General of the United States of America, telling her to take out my enemies in a prosecutorial manner.
Ali, what's interesting, talking to people who have known Pam Bondi for a long time, and we've had Dave Arenberg on the program. I remember when Pam Bondi was first nominated as the Attorney General, saying, actually, you know what, she is somebody who has a reputation for being very feisty, but she's fair and she has a history of working in a bipartisan manner. I'm wondering what Governor Jeb Bush, who she worked with as well, is thinking about that performance. Do you think it's just a prerequisite of doing that job now, that she has to go up there? And does that suggest that she felt she was on thin ice and needed to put on that particular performance, given her history for Donald Trump?
I think for all of the cabinet secretaries, thin ice or not, we've seen them come up, even just in the last few weeks. It's RFK Jr., it's Kash Patel coming up and showing an initial combativeness, declining to answer substantive questions that are asked, I think, largely in good faith by lawmakers who are trying to conduct oversight. I think for Bondi, it's true of most of the people that we've seen go into the Trump administration. They know what it takes to survive, especially in this second iteration. In the first term, it became clear quite quickly, as Lemire and others of us were covering this every day, that it made sense to play to an audience of one. I think that's only become more true in this second term as the shackles are off, and they do feel, I think, unfettered by the norms of Washington that in some ways hemmed them in the first term. Now we're seeing them be quite clear in flaunting things like a revenge agenda. The president, of course, making that tweet to Pam Bondi saying Pam, addressing her by her first name. I mean, it's something that senators yesterday seized onto directly. At one point, one of them asked her the rather obvious question of, are you Pam? And she said, yeah, I'm sure I am. But the fact that there wasn't more pushback to that, to the Attorney General receiving marching orders from the president when they are, as Willie said quite rightly, supposed to be independent entities of each other. It's striking.
So, Ken Delaney, and I mentioned James Comey as we talk about the context of all of this, that the President of the United States, either directly or indirectly, ordering the Justice Department to go after his perceived enemies. Comey will be at that federal courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia. I know you're headed there today. What do we expect to see?
It's going to be a short hearing, Willie, a pro forma hearing. Really, the only thing that's new, and it's interesting, actually, is that we've learned that two prosecutors, two assistant